भगवान श्री योगी रामसूरतकुमार की सर्वं योगी रामसूरतकुमारार्पणमस्तु। A million thanks to Bhagwan for granting us this opportunity to sing his Nama with all the people, especially the evening Sandhya time in this particular month, Margazhi. It's a great blessing and we are grateful as we have been going through some of the experiences of some of the devotees, demonstrations of Bhagwan's love in action towards his devotees, how he came to the rescue of a certain devotee in certain circumstances. A leela a day will keep the Maya away. Let's remember this. Bhagwan's leela. Every day, one leela to read and to tell people. But that rhymes. A leela a day will keep the Maya away. So let's remember and go through one Leela today, a demonstration of Bhagwan's love in action. Despite our own defects, despite our forgetfulness, some 2 or 3 days back, I had a letter from a devotee, Ballarmati, from Virudhunagar, in which she has very beautifully described her experience in 2015. We shall also relive that experience with her to taste this karuna from Bhagwan. Ballarmati says in 2015 there were many problems at home. She was living with her husband separately from the other. Each one in the family had their own families. She and her husband had many problems with the other relatives. Ballarmati's eldest brother was a tower of strength in the earlier times of difficulties of the whole family, that everyone looked up to him for strength and guidance. But that was one time. But after Ballarmati was married, her elder brother was married, things began to happen differently. There were differences of opinion. With the result that there were many times Ballarmati and her husband had to go to the court, which they did not like one bit. It cost them a lot of trouble, not only for the body to wander, to move up and down to the court. There was so much disturbance to their minds also. At one point it reached a peak that Ballarmati and her husband decided, okay, enough. We would have nothing to do with their family, her elder brother's family, because they were put to so much trouble that they felt this was the only way to get around the problems. So they stopped. They decided not to participate in the joy or sorrow of the other family. So they were not even on talking terms with each other, the brother and the sister. One day, the same year 2015, her elder brother met with an accident and died on the spot. He was injured, I think, heavily, and then was admitted in the hospital in Srivilliputtur. Ballarmati was staying in Virudhunagar, a 2-hour journey from Srivilliputtur. When the news of her brother's death reached her, it was late night, and she was waiting for her husband to return. Though, of course, they had made up their mind before not to have anything to do with the other family, her brother's family. But when the news came of the death of her brother, Ballarmati could not bear it. She broke down and she was crying and crying so much. and was waiting for her husband to come to share the news. But when the husband turned up, he had brought a car with him and said that he knew the news. And he said, "Start immediately, we will go there. We will visit them." She said, "Why? You remember how we made up our mind not to participate either in the joy or sorrow of the family? Though I am grief-stricken, if you don't want me to go there, we won't go." But her husband, to her surprise, he said, "Look, Velamati, you may not want to go now, but then later on, all your life, you will be regretting it so much, you will be full of remorse. And you might take it out on me also. I may also have to suffer. Because there's no way we would know how these things get back to us. So it's better to go, attend, and come back." Grief-stricken as she was at the news of her brother, because she remembered the earlier times, how they were close to each other, how he had been a tower of strength to the whole family, how loving they were to each other. So she started, both of them. At 11 o'clock they started from Virudhunagar, and when they reached the hospital it was 1 a.m. And of course at that time of the night they were not allowed, nobody was allowed inside the hospital, the government hospital. So they had to return immediately, return home. But then again 5 a.m., early in the morning at 5 o'clock, they started. They reached there by 7 a.m. and there was already a big crowd in the hospital. Her husband went away to park the car. So she was left alone and she started to cry, remembering all that she had gone through with her brother. She was crying and she could not join anyone else there. Just as she was feeling the bereavement of her brother, a hand reached out to her and held her hand. She looked up to see an old man with a green shirt and a disheveled hair. This man asked her, "Amma, you want to see your brother?" How did he know? Why would he come and ask her, and so consolingly, with so much care and concern? Of course, he didn't strike her at all to ask, even to think like this. She did not find it strange at all that some stranger should come and reach out to her and ask her if she wanted to see her brother. To be able to see the body of a very dear one before it's taken away for its final rest is a merit for the relatives. So she very much wanted to see him. And she said yes. And then, without knowing, without even being conscious of it, he said, "Follow me." And she started to follow him, little thinking that she was following a stranger. And he took her, he began to walk. There was a some building was being built there, and there was a narrow space to cross that. He took her through that, and she followed him obediently, without questioning who he was, why he was taking her along. She says she was not in her mind at all. And then he took her to a room at the back of the hospital, the room where all the dead bodies are usually kept. It's called a mortuary. He took her straight there, but naturally it was locked. So again he said, okay, let's go to the back side of the room. And when they went there were two windows. And below both the windows were closed from inside, so she could not peep in. And below the windows there was a big bush. He said, okay, go near the window and climb up. She simply obeyed him without asking anything. She went near the bush, and then she put one foot on the windowsill, holding on to the rod there, and looked up. There was no opening. The opening was there, the ventilator was there, a little above that. So the stranger said, okay, you put your other foot up above and climb again. And she did, and this time she was able to reach the ventilator. It was open, and he said, look through that. Your brother would be there. How did he know? Who was he to tell her all that? And why would she obey him? But she did. She looked through the ventilator, and she could see clearly her brother's face. There was blood dried up, and she could see his face clearly. She burst out crying, but she had the last look. And then the stranger said, come down. And when she came down, he took her back to another place where all the relatives had gathered. Of course, she did not join any of them. She went to a space a little away from them and started to share her grief with the stranger. She was crying and crying, reminiscing all those happenings that took place before this. At the time, her husband returned after parking the car, and when he saw her sharing her grief with a stranger, naturally he came near and asked, who is this man? Is he a relative of yours? Why are you talking to him? Why are you sharing your experiences with him? She said, I don't know him, but he's very sympathetic. He sympathizes with me, and I simply burst out. So she was there talking to this stranger until the post-mortem of her brother's body was done, was completed. And then the last bit of taking the body by the relatives, all that happened, and she was carried away by those happenings. She forgot all about the stranger. She left the place, hurried with other relatives, and she completely forgot the stranger. So when everything was over, she returned home to Virudhunagar, and then In her privacy, she sat before Bhagwan's picture and burst out, opened her heart and cried her heart out. She said, Bhagwan, why did you do this to me? When I was completely stricken with grief, you left me alone. You didn't give me any consolation. Why didn't you help me? And then she remembered, after she went there to the hospital, she forgot to chant his name. Despite her forgetfulness, suddenly it flashed. The stranger coming and putting his hand on her and asking, would you like to see your brother? And then taking her with such familiarity, with an air of familiarity and command, how he took her straight to that place and how she followed him without questioning who he was, why he was taking her, a total stranger. Everything seemed strange, and suddenly the mystery of the whole thing came upon her with a shock. She knew instantly that stranger was none other than our Bhagwan himself. Of course, it's got to be Bhagwan. A total stranger. Why would he sympathize with her? Why should he offer to take her? And all these questions, one after the other, came to her, and then she knew for sure now it was he who came to her rescue, to guide, to help. The compassion incarnate, Bhagwan, Shri Yogi Ramsuratkumar. And again, there was a fresh bout of tears, and she melted, sitting before Bhagwan, thinking of his love, care and concern, guidance, help. And she knew, even when she forgot him, he didn't. He promptly came to her rescue, to her guidance. She was absolutely overwhelmed. So she wrote to me, remembering this particular incident. She had reminisced the whole thing, and I felt very moved by the whole thing. Now this Bhagwan, with his boundless compassion, it goes to show how when one member of the family becomes a devotee, how he cares. Even when they forget, he comes promptly, presents himself and do the needful. Now this Bhagwan, the embodiment of love, care and concern, is here right in front of us. Let's appeal to him to come to our rescue at this, the great crisis the world is going through. Bhagwan,